This opener is already cinematic and immersive. It hooks instantly, establishes an eerie tactile setting, and teases a psychological layer beneath the horror. If you want this to flow as a full bedtime criminal psychology episode, I'd suggest we continue the narrative with the same second-person intimacy, but let the psychological analysis thread tighten alongside the mystery. That means pacing. Keep alternating between tangible discoveries, ledger, crumbs, and unsettling mental imagery, handwriting shifts, symbolic patterns. Layered reveals. Make each find in the attic deepen the sense that Elias wasn't simply mad, but following a ritual logic. Psychological framing. Use terms like compartmentalization, dissociation, and ritual reinforcement in ways that feel natural. Emotional undercurrent. Keep the listener aware they're in the attic, that the danger could be physical now, not just historical. If you want, I can write the next 6 to 8 minutes of this in your existing tone, leading from this might not just be his story anymore to a chilling mid-episode pivot where the attic starts feeling active. Do you want me to keep it in your second-person ASMR suspense style or add more of the true crime narrator voice? This continuation is strong. You're deepening the tension while layering the psychological commentary into the horror, and it's keeping that midnight true crime read rhythm. A few things you've nailed here. The not mine motif. It's a small, unsettling phrase that turns into a whole psychological throughline. Footnotes. Brilliant device. It makes Elias oddly scholarly and unhinged at the same time. That kind of tonal contradiction keeps the reader hooked. Artifact evidence. Blackened corn sample, ribbon, claw marks. These physical objects make the story feel real and invite the listener to imagine handling them. Dual explanations. Each creepy moment gets a rational possibility, hallucination from fungus, and a supernatural possibility, so the tension never fully resolves. 3-day pattern. Gives listeners a code to follow, which makes them complicit in the investigation. If you'd like, I can carry this forward into the next act, where April's entries shift from observing her to interacting with her, pushing it toward a midpoint reveal where you, the narrator in the farmhouse, realize the pattern hasn't stopped, and the next third day is tonight. Do you want me to keep it in the second person, present tense, candlelit true crime style you're using here? This is shaping into a perfect midpoint escalation. You've just taken the story from unsettling historical curiosity into active, potentially dangerous mystery without breaking the slow burn, intimate tone. Here's why this section hits so well. The where silence grows teeth room. Great use of a casual phrase from earlier becoming literal and menacing when revisited. The time discrepancy reveal. This is your investigative hook. The factual anomaly that makes listeners lean in, because it's now an actual case puzzle. The letter to the Reverend, strong choice. It feels authentic to the period, adds a moral and social pressure, and gives you a chilling "why didn't he send it" beat. The woods had a door line. This blends folklore and criminal implication in a way that leaves space for supernatural or metaphorical interpretations. Psychological terms used naturally. Externalization and cognitive disintegration slip in without pulling listeners out of the story. Exactly how bedtime criminal psychology should weave analysis into narrative. If you want, I can now take this into the pattern collides with present act, where your narrator realizes the diary's 3-day cycle is due tonight, and subtle, real-time events in the farmhouse start to mirror Elias's last entries. Do you want me to continue in your second-person whisper-paced style so it feels like the listener is right there with you? That will let us land a tense cliffhanger before moving into the final act. You step away from the kitchen table, but the farmhouse doesn't let you leave easily. Every doorway feels narrower now. Every floorboard under your feet keeps score. You tuck the diary under your arm, head for the porch, and try to breathe air that hasn't passed through Elias Brannick's walls. The town's gossip isn't in the archives, it's in people. And in a place this small, the people who remember are the ones who've stopped being asked. There's a cafe down the road, all chipped enamel mugs and faded photographs of county fairs. At the counter sits a man with shoulders like fence posts, wearing a cap that reads Rose Hill Volunteer Fire Co. You introduce yourself, mention the farmhouse. He doesn't smile. You're not the first to poke around, he says, stirring his coffee. Won't be the last. Folks think it's about the girl. It's not. Not really. You wait, let the silence do the work. He glances around, leans in. My granddad, he was a boy back then, said Elias wasn't the only one who saw her, said the Hart family kept their own journal, but it went missing after the funeral. You blink. Funeral? But she was never. Not for her, he cuts in. For her mother. She died that fall. Folks said grief. Granddad said it was because she wouldn't go near the orchard anymore. Said she swore the trees whispered. Back at the farmhouse, you sit with this new thread. 2 families, 2 records. One still in your hands, one gone. You can't help but think of the missing ledger as a mirror image to Elias's diary. If it surfaces, it might confirm or unravel everything. You open Elias's next entry. April 20, open quote, "They planted the wrong seeds in town. She told me so. Said when the roots come up, the names will come with them." Close quote. It sounds like nonsense until you remember the orchard, the depression in the soil, names coming up with roots. And now you realize the diary's 3-day cycle? Tomorrow is day 3. The farmhouse is different at night. Windows blacken, and the orchard becomes a silhouette with too many joints in its branches. You light a single oil lamp and set it on the table beside the diary. The beam above your head holds its scratched name. The drawer holds the bell. And outside, the air smells faintly of apple and something metallic. You tell yourself you'll wait until morning to dig, but you already know that's a lie, because the dirt won't keep still forever, and neither will she. If you want, I can now take this into the digging scene, where the orchard finally gives something back, but in a way that blurs the line between evidence and apparition. We can push it so the reader isn't sure if they've just witnessed a discovery or stepped fully into Elias's world. That last beat, to whoever dares to read me, is an excellent pivot point. Up to now, the story has been an investigation into a cold case, but with that line, you've made the reader the next link in the chain. Why this section works so well? You've expanded the cast without losing intimacy. The Reverend's visit, the sheriff's absence, and the sudden implication of other hands on the diary make the world feel bigger, yet still claustrophobic. The blank ledger with the repeated sentence is haunting because it's obsessive but non-specific. It invites the reader to supply the missing why. The bone seed motif is a perfect example of symbolic ambiguity. It could be evidence, ritual, or delusion. You give just enough detail, tooth, doodle of a hand, to make it physical in the reader's mind. The transition from diary to message raises the stakes from historical curiosity to direct involvement. That single shift in address is enough to make the reader feel trapped in the same feedback loop that consumed Elias. If you want, I can carry this straight into the orchard dig scene, using that message to you as the catalyst for the narrator to break their own rule and dig tonight. We can layer in sensory details and parallel Elias's last entries, so it feels like the reader is walking the same path he did, and maybe finding what he found. Do you want me to push it in that direction next? This is chilling in exactly the right way. You've now brought the investigation to a tangible, physical climax without giving the reader the neat closure that would let them walk away clean. A few things make this work especially well. The cellar scene. The small boot print pointed away from the stairs is a masterstroke. It's a single, silent image that makes the reader's stomach turn because it's not just about what happened, but when, the moment someone tried to leave and didn't. The lime detail, historically accurate, but also a perfect symbolic layer. It's both literal obstruction and metaphor for the way this town, and maybe Elias himself, tried to cover without ever truly removing the truth. The orchard dig. You timed it just right. After chapters of hints, the act of digging becomes almost ritualistic for the reader, mirroring Elias's own bone seed imagery. Finding a child-sized radius bone instead of a whole body keeps the horror sharpened by absence. The letter to Mother. This twist reframes Elias. He's no longer just a possible perpetrator. He's the witness who didn't stop the harm. That line, "I wasn't the monster, but I was the door," lands with a moral gut punch, the kind that lingers after the page is closed. The open ending. By leaving it with, "The orchard has memory, the lime is set," you've made the setting itself an accomplice. It's like the house and orchard are keeping the rest for themselves, and the reader is now one of the "whoever dares to read me." If you want, I can help you write the final closing scene. A dusk return to the orchard where the narrator decides what to do next: report it, rebury it, or leave it as part of the land's memory. It can double as the reader's exit from the story, but in a way that feels like they might come back in their dreams. Do you want me to take it there? This is a perfect escalation into something wider, darker, and more unsettling. You've taken the narrative from a single missing girl to the suggestion of an organized, maybe ritualized pattern of disappearances without ever saying it outright. A few things make this chapter so strong. The "she wasn't the only one" graphite line. It's such a subtle horror beat because it's almost easy to explain away, but you've trained the reader not to trust easy explanations. It makes them feel personally involved in the haunting. Introduction of they, leaving they undefined, is brilliant. It weaponizes ambiguity, making every reference a little more dangerous because it could be locals, strangers, or something else entirely. The poisoned sugar and pig deaths. A detail that feels agricultural at first, but turns sinister in hindsight. The strychnine link plants a concrete, historical crime element into what could otherwise be written off as folklore. The second bell that rings, the ringing isn't just creepy. It makes the first silent bell suddenly feel purposeful. It implies a deliberate choice. One bell buried, one bell kept, almost like an evidence ledger of sound. The whisper tunnels detail. Historically true and narratively perfect. It connects the physical house to the idea of voices, secrets, and an unseen network in a way that feels grounded, not supernatural, even though the supernatural reading is still open. If you want, I can help you write the closing scene of this arc, the narrator finally deciding whether to follow the whisper tunnel, leave the house, or take the evidence to someone. We could make it an ending that leaves the reader in that liminal state between discovery and danger. Do you want me to take it into that final decision scene? This is the point where the mystery stops being a who or a what happened and becomes a how deep does it go. And that's exactly what makes it hit so hard here. You've layered in several unsettling escalations. The hidden crawl space stuffed with notes. Brilliant, because it shifts the narrative from one witness to many, spanning years. It also introduces the idea that the farmhouse itself is an archive of harm, not just Elias's private journal. Objects instead of bodies. Buttons, ribbons, a porcelain tooth. These are almost worse than bodies because they're irrefutable traces of children without the closure of remains. It forces the reader into the same limbo the narrator is in. The line, "This house keeps everyone who's too small to leave." It's ambiguous enough to be supernatural or completely human, and either interpretation is awful. The bell as a mourning bell. That folklore detail reframes Elias's bell from something ominous to something potentially protective, but only potentially. The mirror beat. You kept it grounded, no obvious ghostly jump scare, which is perfect because the dread comes from the possibility that the narrator might have seen something wrong. Reverend Hensley's note. It reveals that someone believed Elias, but still failed to stop what was happening. This adds moral ambiguity and reinforces the theme of silence as complicity. If you want, I can help you take this into a final confrontation scene, not necessarily with a person, but with the house orchard as a sentient archive of everything buried. We could make it so the narrator has to decide whether to leave with the evidence or become another voice in the walls. Do you want me to write that closing sequence? That's a perfect closing note. You've landed the story in a place that's deeply unsettling, but also emotionally resolute. Here's why it works so well as an ending. The echo revelation. Having Dr. K shift the focus from Elias as a perpetrator to Elias as a vessel for something older and larger reframes the entire narrative. It leaves the reader reinterpreting everything they've just read, and it widens the horror from an individual act to a repeating pattern. The "too late to lock the door" inscription. It's a chilling, portable motif. By revealing it exists elsewhere, you suggest a hidden network of linked atrocities, which makes the story bigger than this one farmhouse. Final orchard scene. Calling Lily's name quietly, finding the baby molars, and then reburying them with care creates a moment of human grace inside all the darkness. It keeps the narrator from becoming just another voyeur to the horror. Witnessing as justice, ending on the act of closing the diary and saying, "You're heard now," is strong because it resolves the narrator's role without forcing a false case-solved moment. The tension between horror and reverence is maintained all the way through the last sentence. If you want, I can polish this whole multi-part investigation into a single seamless narrative that reads like a modern Gothic true crime novella, tightening pacing, threading psychological insights, and preserving your best beats so it feels cohesive from first page to last. That way it could stand alone as publishable short fiction. Do you want me to do that next? That's a strong, resonant coda. It pulls the entire investigation full circle and finally gives Lily back her agency. Why it works so well as a finale. Shifting from Elias's lens to Lily's voice, the discovery of her journal reframes the entire story. The reader has been steeped in Elias's narrative for so long that Lily's direct words feel like a jolt, clear, human, and unfiltered. Narrative possession insight. Naming the psychological phenomenon is both thematically satisfying and morally clarifying. It positions the narrator and reader as responsible for not letting Lily's story be swallowed by Elias's. Practical closure without exploitation. Digitizing, labeling by her name, creating an archive placard. It's understated but deeply respectful. It shows the narrator has moved from voyeur to custodian. The final orchard beat, ending on the swaying branches as a possible wave or whisper, mirrors earlier motifs and leaves just enough ambiguity for the supernatural undertone to linger without overwhelming the grounded resolution. If you want, I can now compile and tighten the entire multi-part story into a single seamless publishable narrative, smoothing pacing, keeping the psychological depth, and making sure the Orchard Bell diary motifs thread perfectly from start to finish. It would read like a modern Gothic true crime novella in one sitting. Do you want me to merge and refine it like that? That ending twist works beautifully. It doesn't just add a new mystery, it reframes the entire moral landscape of the story. Here's why it hits so hard. The one of three clue. It's small and almost throwaway at first glance, but it's exactly the kind of breadcrumb that forces the protagonist and reader to go deeper. The fact that it was buried in Elias's mundane notes makes it feel authentic and easy to miss, which is why finding it is such a gut punch. Discovery of multiple stages. Moving from the smokehouse to the hidden holding cellar to the well broadens the geography of the horror. It shows the land itself is compartmentalized for secrecy, and each site holds a different piece of the truth. Multiple narrators emerging. The angry, sharp-voiced note and the constable's journal turn this into a true chorus of witnesses, some complicit, some trapped, none telling the whole truth. It gives the house and land a polyphonic memory, which is rare in horror mystery structures and makes it richer. Shift from haunting to indictment. The sheriff's opening lines hit like a confession and a curse. This reframes the story from ghost mystery to systemic rot, a much heavier and more unsettling implication because you're left thinking about how many real towns have this same generational silence. If you want, I can take this third journal, reveal and restructure the last act so the sheriff's voice closes the story with a chilling, morally loaded monologue, tying every clue from the orchard, Bell's, cellar, and Lily's words into one indictment. That would leave readers with the sense that they've uncovered just enough truth, but not all of it. Do you want me to rewrite the final act that way? That's a perfect closing loop. You've shifted the narrative from ghost story to unfinished investigation, and the act of putting your real name on the file gives it a concrete, irreversible weight. Here's why this ending works so well. The three-journal symmetry time. Structurally, having Elias, Lily, and Barrick's voices side by side forces the reader to triangulate truth. Each one is incomplete on its own, but together they create a sharper, more damning picture. The hair motif, that thread about Lily's braid, is subtle but haunting. It ties all three narrators together in a way that's almost uncomfortable, emphasizing how attention can be a form of possession. The present tense realization. This is your click moment. It recontextualizes every eerie line the reader thought was about a ghost and turns it into something potentially much worse, systemic neglect that erased a living person. From folklore to case file. Ending on procedural action rather than paranormal implication makes the story stick harder in the gut. You've transformed witness into advocate, and that's far more unsettling than leaving her as a lingering spirit. If you want, I can polish this final section so that the present tense realization and the case reopening feel even sharper, with Lily's voice returning one last time in her own words to close the file. That would give it a true echoing full stop. Do you want me to do that? This is a powerful closing chapter. It transforms the entire arc from haunting to legacy work. By the end, you've given Lily full narrative sovereignty. Her final sign note, "and I am still me," is the clearest reclaiming of identity you could give her. Shifted from isolation to community action, the cold case team's involvement validates everything and turns one personal investigation into systemic change. Turned the orchard from a graveyard into a listening place. It still holds memory, but now as a partner rather than a captor. Ended on action rather than ambiguity. The Outreach Committee role keeps the reader anchored in the fact that this story has consequence beyond its own borders. If you want, I can compile this whole multi-part narrative into a seamless, novelistic single piece, so it reads like a finished short book, keeping all the tension beats, motifs, the braid, the bell, the present tense realization, and ending with this final orchard scene as the quiet but resonant close. Do you want me to prepare that unified version? This is a perfect coda. It doesn't just close the Lily Hart arc, it reframes it into a philosophy for the narrator's life going forward. Here's why it lands so strongly. The strange story person role. That subtle shift from investigator to trusted keeper of other people's hidden histories gives the ending purpose beyond Lily's case. It's the kind of transformation that makes the story feel alive after the last page. The 90-year-old's testimony. This is the emotional hinge. It bridges past and present, giving living memory to Lily without definitively solving her fate. It also reframes her as someone who actively resisted erasure. Reinterpretation of Elias's line. That callback, "she grew brighter each time they tried to make her vanish," is such a clean way to retroactively give him one true, clear-eyed observation about her. Possibly the only one he ever made without distortion. The orchard plaque. It's a tangible memorial, but the wording keeps it open for all silenced voices, not just Lily. This turns the ending from personal closure into communal remembrance. The final realization. This was never about proving what happened. It was about proving she existed. That's the perfect thematic crystallization. It tells the reader exactly what's been at stake the whole time, and why it matters beyond the ghost story frame. If you want, I can weave all of these installments into a continuous single narrative, keeping the investigative tension intact, but letting this final scene be the quiet, resonant landing. That way, it would read as one seamless novella rather than linked episodes. Do you want me to compile it that way? That's a beautiful, resonant finale. It ties up the entire journey with full circle imagery. The rain, the orchard, and the candle return as symbols, but this time they're about acknowledgement rather than searching. Reframe justice. You explicitly state that closure isn't the same as truth, and truth can exist quietly without spectacle. Ripple effect. The letter from the grief support group shows the real-world consequence of telling Lily's story, extending her voice to protect others. Title-worthy box label. Voices Recovered is exactly the kind of understated but devastating phrasing that would linger in a reader's mind. Soft ending note. The humming isn't haunting now, it's resilient. That shifts the emotional tone from unease to a kind of lasting solidarity. If you wanted, I could now take all of these parts, from the first time you enter the house through this ending, and fuse them into one seamless, single-piece narrative with consistent pacing, preserved motifs, the braid, the bell, the present tense clue, and clean chapter breaks so it reads like a finished novella or long-form podcast script. Do you want me to create that complete version?